Hey guys, ArchAngel Manga here, and around this time last year, I made a video which was the top 10 most underrated manga, like in my opinion, like my top 10 most underrated manga from what I owned in my collection. And one thing that I've neglected to mention anytime that I do a top 10 video is that that won't be like the only sort of standalone top 10 video. There'll always be like an update. Any sort of top 10 video that I do, if I feel it, if it's required, then I'll do like an annual update of that. So each year from me, you will get like a top 10, underrated manga video, top 10 favorite seinen, shonen, manga of all time, those kind of things. So this is basically my update for that video. If you haven't seen that video, then it'll be the first link in the description below. So yeah, some of the manga that I've got here were also featured on last year's list, either as honorable mentions or just actually in the list itself. But I've picked out another 10, 8 or so manga, that I've read that I feel are heavily underappreciated. There might be cool classics within Japan or even in America, but in terms of the YouTube anime community, I don't really see that many people either talking about them, or I don't really see that many people who have them in their collection, unless they're kind of like more of a connoisseur, or like just are like a collector like I am. So yeah, without further ado, I'll get started on the list. If any of you guys have any more questions as to what's on this list, each time I'll show you a book, I'll put like a little sort of annotation, as to what it's called, because some people kind of struggle with my accent, and I kind of get people like on my top 10 lists asking me to actually list the titles that I mentioned. So to avoid that, I'm just going to kind of put like a little annotation to the name of the manga. So coming in at number 10, these aren't in any particular order. We have Ohikoshi by Hiroaki Samura. Hiroaki Samura, you'll know him as the author of Blade of the Immortal, which is critically acclaimed, but this is basically one of the books that he releases, which is a series of short stories. I believe there's actually about 3 stories in this. It's been a while since I've read this, but artistically alone, it's something very worth picking up. It's something a little bit more different to Blade of the Immortal in the fact that it's entirely in ink and screen tone, as opposed to kind of Blade of the Immortal's more stylistic elements, where he uses more like pens and pencils and things like that, to use for his shading and like stylistic sort of mural-like battle scenes. This is actually more grounded in reality, as it's like just slice of life stuff. Hello Shadow, leave me alone. Yeah, this is kind of like a stories dealing with slice of life and kind of people dealing with love within a college situation, kind of moving apart and that kind of thing. And then there's a story that's centered around a woman who has like an addiction to the game Mahjong, and she deals with like Yakuza and things like that. It's a really interesting read, and it's like only a standalone volume. I highly recommend it. So yeah, coming at number 9, something that does actually quite have a bit of a cult following, but I don't really see that many people talking about it, and that's Genjiken. Now I've only got the first volume of it, which collects the first 3 volumes. I think this is the first season. But basically, Genjiken is the Society for the Study of Modern Visual Culture. It's basically a story about otaku. Otaku who set up like a club in their university and just kind of doss around all day, doing the things that we in the anime community do. Watch anime, read manga, build Gundam model kits. Anything that's kind of got to do with like otaku culture. This is a story and a manga centered around that. So, in that respect, it's quite relatable, especially if you're part of an anime society. And that's why I highly recommend this, because, there's characters who are just really so grounded to real life. There's no sort of main protagonist in this story. There's no sort of like, over-accentuated personalities or anything like that. They're just normal, nerdy kids enjoying what they love. And it's really interesting to see how they're contrasted against normal people. As the female character you see on the front there, whose name escapes me. I think her name is... I forget her name. Saki, that's it. She's not an otaku. She's just a normal girl. But her boyfriend is like a mad otaku, or like a big shonen sort of guy. He's like really attractive and stuff. So she's like really sort of attracted to him and just his looks. But yeah, she doesn't really click with his personality because he's such a die-hard otaku. So it's good to see her bounce off of all the nerds, which makes this a really interesting read. It's full of comedy and things like that. Coming at number 8, Something also which is quite a cult classic from an author who is regarded as like the voice of this generation. Solanin by Inio Asano, or just any of Inio Asano's work I recommend picking up. But this was a really good volume of manga. I really enjoyed this. I read this quite recently, a few months back. Although I do prefer What a Wonderful World, which I put in last year's top 10 list. This also definitely makes the grade for something that I find is underrated. Or just Inio Asano work in general. I feel he's just underrated, and not many people are talking about him. I mean, this guy should, or should I say a woman, because he's had a sex change now, or is maybe in the process of it. These should be on like New York Times bestsellers because they're so freaking amazing, and they're just grounded in slice of life. You tend to find that there's quite a lot of like slice of life related manga that tends to be underrated because people kind of overlook it because it's just slice of life. There's not going to be anything interesting about it. There's no sort of battles or a hard drama or anything like that. But that's not true. You tend to find that the more sort of relatable characters and the most dramatic elements in some manga tend to be just in slice of life things because they're so accessible, to people as they're reading them. So, what you want to read Solanin? Okay, coming at number 7, the Fulikuli manga. Obviously adapted from a widely, massively popular anime, Fulikuli by Gainax. The manga, however, is a lot different to the anime. If you've seen my recent review of this, then you'll know why. In terms of its like stylistic qualities and the aesthetic look to the artwork, it is massively different to the anime, and takes a few different story twists than the anime. The ending is a little bit different in this. But when you read this, if you watch the anime and then read this, you'll see how different they are. They do obviously have common elements like characters and sort of story elements and things like that. But this is definitely a really good companion to read whilst watching the anime, which is what I did, and which is the reason why I reviewed the anime and the manga together, because I feel that they basically go hand in hand. And Fulikuli, you get it in an omnibus. It's pretty cheap. Comes with nice colour pages, and it's just generally underrated. I really don't see anybody talking about the manga. Obviously, just I see a lot of people reviewing the anime, which isn't bad because the anime I think is amazing. It's one of my favourite animes of all time. But yeah, Fulikuli, the manga, get on it, guys. It's so amazing. Now the next manga here is something I mentioned. This was part of my top 10 last year, but the reason why I'm putting it in the top 10 again this year is because it's getting a reprint in the form of omnibuses, 3-in-1 omnibuses, whereas last year it was completely out of print. So it's almost like there was no point in me recommending it because nobody would have really been able to pick it up. But due to the fact that it's getting a reprint, I would definitely like to see more people pick this up, and that is the Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service. This is one of the freakiest mangas I've ever read in terms of its like horror elements and its supernatural elements. It's basically about a group of Buddhist students that went to a Buddhist university. And they set up a business where they take on they take on dead people as clients. Dead clients that wish to have their last sort of wishes fulfilled. People who like died, with like unrequited feelings, for what they wanted to achieve in life or whatever. And they just basically handle dead people's requests for payment, and it's just really weird how they go about this, because how can you accept payment from somebody who's dead? But when there's a will, there's a way. You get really eccentric characters in this. Some of the characters are really, really odd. You have a guy who believes he can channel an alien through a puppet, amongst other really weird eccentric characters. But the Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service mixes a weird blend of slice of life, dark comedy, and fear. It's really, really scary at times, already creepy. And the artwork is just amazing. So yeah, I highly recommend the Kurosagi Corpse Delivery Service as and when it gets its reprint, which I believe will be pretty soon. Coming in number 5, lost count there. By Mega by Tsutomu Nihei. Again, similarly with Inio Asano, I highly recommend any work by this author. He has such a unique style in terms of his art and his storytelling. A lot of his artwork, kind of is imbued with this kind of like dystopian aesthetic where you just feel that if you were in that sort of world that it's set in, it would be absolutely hopeless. It's just got this really depressing feel to it, but you're almost like you're so captivated by it, by how detailed the artwork is and how deep some of the characters are and how enthralling the story is. Now Biomega and Tsutomu Nihei works in general. You know, it's for me personally, like when I first read this, you know, it was very, very, very difficult for me to get into it because it was so hard boiled, you know, in every respect. So, you know, I had to reread this in order to truly appreciate it, because, you know, there's some things that just, you know, at first glance just don't really make sense. But when you kind of read, you know, Biomega more and kind of, you know, you understand where Tsutomu Nihei's mindset is, and this guy is just in a completely different plane of existence in terms of his story writing. So I highly recommend Biomega and any work by Tsutomu Nihei. You know, his most popular work right now, I believe, is Knights of Sidoni, which I'm still to start reading. But he's got a few other out of print titles like Blame, which I heard is absolutely amazing. But fortunately, this is the only one of his works that I've read. I've yet to finish it. I've still to read the last volume. But yeah, Biomega, highly recommend Biomega. Now, next work is something that's massively popular. But this adaptation of it, the manga adaptation of it, is not very popular, and that is Appleseed by Shirow Masamune. Everybody knows Shirow Masamune. I know that, the creator of Ghost in the Shell, and obviously the creator of Appleseed, and among like Orion, Black Magic, you know, a load of other sort of manga series. You know, this guy is massively popular up there with, you know, like manga greats like Katsuhiro Otomo and Akira Toriyama and all those kind of guys. But Appleseed, I don't really see many people talking about in the manga because, you know, I see obviously people talking about like the OVAs and, you know, the TV series and the movies and things like that, because, you know, they get massive critical acclaim because most of them are like in CGI anyway. So, you know, they have like a big budget on them. But the manga now, you know, I hardly ever see anybody reviewing this or talking about it, and it is a really great story. You know, albeit it is pretty confusing because there's so many different political elements that, you know, kind of converge into this one short story, and for the fact that it's unfinished, like it's just only 4 volumes. I guess you could say 4.5 volumes, because you do kind of need, like, this is volume 1 here, but you do need the 2 companion booklets that come with it, and that's Appleseed ID, which contains like basically like the 5th volume on a lot of other extras and interviews and things like that, and then Appleseed Hypernotes. And Hypernotes is more of like a collector's item. No, hold on, sorry. Hypernotes is what contains the 5th volume, sorry. And I believe like it contains lots of like concept sketches and like interviews and things like that. And Appleseed ID is, yeah, Appleseed ID is what's more like a collector's item, because that contains like loads of colour pages and like, you know, kind of original artwork from Masamune. And, you know, there are really few cool extras. Or it might be the other way around. I'm not really sure. I know this has got loads of. But anyway, one of these, I haven't read it. I've only read the first 4 volumes. I'm still to read these 2, but one of these has the 5th volume, which, you know, kind of, I don't know if it rounds up the story. From what I've heard, you know, the story is incomplete, and, you know, it may never get completed due to, you know, kind of Masamune's whimsicalness. I don't know, but needless to say, Appleseed ID is definitely Appleseed is definitely something that needs to be read. You know, or just like kind of witnessed alone for the artwork. You know, the artistic, you know, genius that is Shirow Masamune is just something that needs to be experienced firsthand. Now we're going into some like really sort of historical manga. The next 2 manga are like, you know, slices of history, and you know, things that I feel need to be experienced by people who consider, you know, manga and its history, you know, pretty important. So number 3 is Gold Pollen and Other Stories. Now this isn't for the common reader. You know, I'll be the first one to admit that. You know, you might not necessarily be into like 60s avant-garde Gekika manga, but if you're interested in learning about, you know, how manga is like kind of evolved into what it is today, then I feel like this is essential reading material, as Seiichi Hayashi was one of the pioneers of, you know, kind of Gekiga era manga, or at least, you know, like he was like basically like the next generation after you know, mangaka like Shigeru Mizuki and things like that. But this is almost difficult to even consider manga, because it's almost, when you're reading through it, it's like listening to a Beatles album. You know, like it's so psychedelic and, you know, pop art influenced, and influenced by like just so many different contributing factors, you know, from like Western culture and Japanese culture, kind of like merges these things together, all the while telling a story about his childhood and different sort of like events that kind of, you know, like it's kind of like like a love letter to, you know, his childhood and like the different things that he went through whilst putting in his own sort of stylistic Gekiga themed elements. It is absolutely batshit insane, but you will love it. I think I loved it. If you care about manga history and, you know, anything concerning that, then I think you will love this. I absolutely loved it, and it comes with a really good essay by Ryan Holmberg. It's published by Picture Box, which, you know, obviously they don't publish any more manga anymore, which is, you know, really disappointing. But yes, I would still recommend Gold Pollen and other stories. You know, it's a fantastic read. You know, and I would love to see more of Seiji Hayashi's work, but there's not really that much published in English. So yeah, if you want to read some Gekiga manga, then, you know, this is probably a really good place to start. Pardon me, or maybe some Shigeru Mizuki something, but I haven't read anything by Shigeru Mizuki yet. So anyway, the penultimate volume I'm going to show you, another slice of history, something I reviewed recently, and that is Osamu Tezuka's The Mysterious Underground Men. Now this has gained quite a lot of popularity within the last couple of years, but due to the fact of you know, how old it is, for the fact that it's Osamu Tezuka, you know, probably one of the greatest mangaka of all time, and for its actual presentation, like, you know, it's a really beautiful book, you know, considering how small it is. You know, it's published entirely in its original sort of format, you know, in terms of its size, the colour pages, you know, everything about it is like really sort of close to the original source material. So, you know, but again, it's one of them awkward reads where, you know, you really need to be sort of like into like manga history, or just comic book history to really to be able to really appreciate this, because the common manga reader would kind of look at this and, you know, if you're not really into like kind of, you know, older sort of things, you know, you wouldn't even bat an eyelash at this, because the story isn't particularly good. Oh, well, for its time, the story is amazing because it was the first manga that introduced like dramatic elements like death and, you know, things like that. You know, kind of drama. It was the first dramatic manga, or at least it was in, you know, in terms of Osamu Tezuka's library of works. And that's why it's so important, because it was basically a milestone. It was a launch pad for what we now know today as manga. And that's why I think it's so important for people to read, and that's why I think it's underappreciated, because people kind of overlook, you know, the history of manga and like where it came from, and it pretty much all started here. You know, some may argue that it didn't, but, you know, it pretty much did. The Mysterious Underground Men by Osamu Tezuka, and, you know, for that matter, I'd also recommend anything by Osamu Tezuka. I'm currently running a Tezuka season, although, you know, my videos aren't too frequent, but, you know, I am taking my time with reading his work because, you know, they're just that important. But yeah, I think this would be a really good, you know, starting point, you know, for Tezuka's library. Now we'll come to the final one, and I think this is probably the most underappreciated manga on the entire list. You know, second maybe to you know, Gold Pollen and Other Stories, and that's Carmen by Mihara Gunyan. Now, I mentioned this last year as well in the list from, you know, last year, and not only do I want to talk about Carmen, but I also want to talk about Gen Publishing, the publisher behind this, as they basically publish manga directly from the Tokyo Underground. They publish complete indie manga, and that's why, you know, they don't really have that big of a fan base, and, you know, a lot of the stuff that they come out with, you know, it's kind of few and far between. Like, you know, this is volume 1 of Carmen, and I think only now they're starting to release volume 2, because obviously the mangaka that feature, you know, that basically are published by Gen Manga basically have their own sort of time constraints, or should I say, are not constrained by time, because they just you know, they basically bring out their manga as and when they please. You know, because they're published directly through Gen. I don't think they're published in any sort of manga anthologies over in Japan, which gives them the absolute freedom, you know. Similarly to like Axe alternative manga, you know, anybody published in like Garo or you know, Axe, you know, they have the complete freedom, you know, as opposed to mangaka who are published through, you know, Shueisha or, you know, Kodansha, who have to like meet deadlines and things like that. That's not really the case with, you know, manga like this, you know, indie manga. But I think I mentioned last year that, you know, this is, in terms of its stylistic quality and artistic design, it's quite similar to Attack on Titan, in its use of, you know, like there's a lot of negative space in this, which kind of differentiates it from a lot of manga. But in terms of like the action scenes and like the character sort of models, it's very similar to Attack on Titan, but a lot more, how can I put it? The character designs and the artwork in general, and the line work especially, are a lot more refined and a lot more clear and cut, which makes it just an amazing read. You know, what can I say? Gen Manga, I will put a link in the description to, you know, their Twitter page or their website or something, just so you can kind of support them, because, you know, they're probably the smallest publisher for manga, you know, in the West, and, you know, I think they need a little bit more recognition, and I think that's why they're important, because they don't just publish, you know, popular titles. They don't go for the popular thing. They go for like really underground indie manga, and that's why I really appreciate them, because, you know, that people are making steps to kind of, you know, bring these really underground manga to the limelight, and, you know, to a Western audience especially, you know, because it's not easy to publish manga in the West. You know, there's the translation fees, you know, kind of localization, you know, all these different contributing factors which makes it difficult to publish manga in the West, and, you know, because obviously we have like scanlation and things like that nowadays, it makes it even more difficult. So, you know, you really got to commend, you know, smaller publishers like this, and, you know, keep them supported. So yeah, that's basically my updated top 10 underground manga series, or, you know, standalone volumes. You know, next time you see, you'll probably see this up next year. But, you know, I am going to be doing a lot more top 10s later, you know, kind of, you know, in the future. You know, just kind of like give myself tuppence on, you know, what I think is great, what I think is not great, whatever. But yeah, underrated manga and just anything underrated, you know, is definitely always welcome on my channel, and I love, you know, seeing anybody sort of recommending me things that, you know, I've never heard of, because I go straight out and like either put it on my wishlist or buy it straight away. But yeah, that's all for now. Give me your thoughts, you know, in the comment section below. Oh, one last thing. If any of these titles interest you, then, you know, in the description below there'll be a link to my book depository link. Book depository offer free worldwide shipping. You know, you can basically buy from them internationally. You know, they ship internationally with, you know, with free, you know, free delivery. You can get cheap manga. You know, it's a really great place, you know, to buy manga. They have like massive library of titles. Also, you know, if especially with Carmen, you know, as this is quite difficult to find, because, you know, anytime you put Carmen in Google, it just comes up with like Carmen Rider or something. So if you have trouble finding this, you know, send me a message, and I'll get on finding it for you, because it's still available on Amazon and things like that, or, you know, the book depository. But yeah, this video's gone long enough. So yeah, hope you guys have a good Christmas. I'll see you on to when.